Welcome. In today's video, I'm going to be discussing what about nicotine addiction, mentally, physically, emotionally, and spiritually, is seen from a third party perspective. And starting off with, the hardship that you can go through when it comes to a nicotine addiction, when it comes to mentally. You can constantly be trying to mentally be in a space of no stress when it comes to mentally. Using your nicotine addiction as a way to mentally reset and relieve your mental state of being of any stress or thoughts or whatever that you've been maybe having a challenging time with or whatnot. And then coping with that situation with that substance is also building dependency towards it when it comes to mentally, because anytime you deal with anything when it comes to mentally, you automatically want to reward that behavior with some nicotine. You automatically want to relieve that stress that you're going through with some nicotine, because you're viewing it as, okay, as soon as I get through this, I'm going to be able to hit my nicotine, and therefore mentally be in a state of mind where my stress is gone for a second. I mentally feel lightheaded. I mentally feel refreshed or whatnot. You can look at that however the way you want to look at it, but really it's only for a short term amount of time, and to be honest, it doesn't last as long as one would like it to. And when it comes to how that could affect you is depending on something when it comes to mentally. Therefore, you're not mentally stable without it from time to time. You may struggle and be in very unstable energy when it comes to your mental state of being, or a really unstable mental space, and dealing with thought patterns, recurring thoughts that are difficult, challenging. It could be you doubting yourself when having mental thoughts of, oh, this is not good. Oh, am I, doing something that I shouldn't be doing, even though I just want to put me in a new space when it comes to mentally. That's going to put you into a state of being where you're experiencing a lot of mental stress, because you're almost going from back and forth from stress mentally to depending on something to help that stress go away. Irritated mentally to depending on something to help that irritation go away. Mentally fixated on getting that next fix of nicotine, while on the other hand, you are just becoming more and more dependent on a substance. And so that's kind of some mental kind of work when it comes to mental perspectives on how a nicotine addiction could affect your mental state of being. Not only that, but you may view it as, from your perspective of, why am I so mentally fixated, mentally dependent on a substance, where when I look and see other people in the reality that aren't dependent on these substances, that are living without these substances, how come they are having less mental strife, less mental thinking about something that either made you think a way you didn't want to think or whatever it may be, and then having to depend on a substance to help clear out or at least put you in a new state of being when it comes to mentally. So keep that in mind. And so when it comes to physically, what kind of things can we realize? Well, going back to mentally, one may see from a third-party perspective of someone who is addicted to, let's say, a substance. You can say nicotine, you could say any substance that you can think of, or any behavior or action that one is in a repetitive, motion of, an action of. You can see it as this person is on a vibration mentally that is lower than one that is going without, one that is independent of that physical substance in order to reach a certain space when it comes to the mental state of being. And physically the same way, where one might want to ease the body, make your body feel good, feel that physical feeling of, I don't know what you'd call it. You could say warmth, you could say relaxation. A lot of times you can physically get that stuff through physical exercise, through putting yourself through challenging things when it comes to physically, putting yourself in physically hard spaces that are challenging, that are going to have you overcoming things when it comes to physically. And therefore, out of that, you can get a space physically of fulfillment, a space of physically feeling, let's say, at ease. You may call it relaxed or whatever that may be. And then we look at someone who is dependent on a substance when it comes to physically to get into that space physically. Then you have to continuously keep pursuing that substance physically because it is fleeting. It is not something that lasts. Of course, when you look at the other example of just deriving fulfillment out of holistic experiences that you have when it comes to physically, sure, those are also fleeting too. But the thing is, that's not damaging your physical vessel necessarily if you're using it in ways to grow and if you're using it in ways to benefit your physical state of being. Versus the other perspective where you are dependent on something physically that is possibly, I just read something on the app X, which used to be called Twitter, and I was going to go ahead and make a reaction video to responding to the feeds like I have done in my past couple videos, but I decided, you know what, I'm going to take a break on that. I can return to that eventually, but let's talk about, you know, what someone said on that, and it was, nicotine addiction is literally burning your life away. And yeah, that's the example of burning your life away when it comes to smoking cigarettes, but when it comes to, and that's nicotine, but when it comes to vaping as well, you're basically, I'd call it suffocating yourself, putting something into your lungs that your lungs can't even beneficially use. And in order for you to use your lungs in the best proficient way, or for them to be in the most proficient health, is not to be suffocated. And or you can almost imagine it as just imagining that vapor, smoke, whatever it may be that you're ingesting, to get into your lungs, and your lungs breathing that, and then you imagine what it's like breathing air, which has no, of course you can see clouds and whatnot, but that's a different stage of it, and that's two things combined. But like water, and you have to come to realize that that's not going to be healthy for the lungs. That's not going to be necessarily good for your future, going down the road. So I agree with that, what that person said, and that can be the case for any addiction. That could be the case for any negative action that you may be involved in. It can have that effect of slowly taking away things from you, slowly taking what you have from you. But I've found that physically, when you are in a situation like that, you have to overcome it. You have to put the physical, whatever had happened behind, whatever it is, you have to get to a space where you're not focused on that, you're not putting any energy towards that, and you're moving into a space that is detached from that action, that is detached from that substance, whatever it may be. Therefore, you're moving into a physical state of being that is right for you, and that is going to be beneficial for you in the long run and for you down the road. This is a little loud right here. This is like a, I don't know, interesting beat right here that I've got. Let me go ahead and, I don't know if that's too loud or what, but I'll just let it rock. But anyways, when it comes to emotionally, or let's go back to physically. So being able to see this perspective from a third party position, you see that one person is not fixated, that is not dependent on a substance when it comes to physically. You see this person having actions that are free from addiction, free from negative action, free from whatever that is that one needs to detach from, versus you see one that is attached to it and that is constantly reminded of and having to do things when it comes to physically to feed that energy into that physical state of being. So keep that in reality and keep that in your physical reality as awareness. And when it comes to emotionally, deriving that emotional fulfillment, that good feeling from nicotine or from a substance or from a negative action, that could be a good feeling that you're getting out of feeling pain, because you know that pain and pleasure are connected when it comes to what gives you pain can also give you pleasure. What gives you pleasure can also give you pain. So you got to keep that balance in mind when you're putting your emotional state of being in the hands of something external. When you're putting your emotional state of being in the hands of something that is so potent that it can make you feel anything that you want to make you feel at any specific time. So being dependent on something like that emotionally, you're going to look at this as someone is less emotionally free, someone is less emotionally independent, less emotionally available, less emotionally vulnerable for experiences to come through the present and carrying on through the future. So you have to take that in mind and also be aware that you obviously have to be emotionally stable in what you're doing mentally, what your thoughts are, what your physical actions are, spiritually, the state of being that you're in and the path that you're on when it comes to spiritually. You got to think about that and say, okay, what emotional state of being is this putting me in? If I'm not in the right emotional state of being because of those things, then I need to do the right thing in order to keep my emotional state of being in a balance. You got advertisements going, so hoping that doesn't give me a copyright on this video. If it does, doesn't matter anyways. People will still find the video if it's right for them to find it. And so that's emotionally. Always doing the right things so you can have that emotional balance, you can have that emotional stability. And if you're going into something where you're going to need to be emotionally stable, then absolutely make sure you have in check what you need to have in check in order to thrive in that circumstance, and in order to thrive in that situation. So like I said, we can see that one is, from a third party perspective, is dependent on something to feel a certain way, whereas another is deriving their emotional fulfillment out of themselves and the things that they are involved in, rather than some artificial feeling, whatever you may call it, some doctored feeling of, doing something bad. Like I said, it could be a negative action that you are, it's so bad, it makes me feel guilty, that's the pain, and then, but low key, after you get through that, you feel the pleasure. That's something that you cannot let start to affect your emotional state of being and play on your emotional state of being and continue to be independent from things that are having that cause, having that cycle in your experience. So keep that, take that to heart. And when it comes to spiritually, when we're fulfilling our desires, we're playing out actions, and those actions are going to have an effect on the way we affect the spiritual world. You know, how our spirit is traveling through these experiences and what we choose to do and what we choose not to do. So making sure that you have an understanding of what is, right for you, what you have accepted into your reality, based upon your spiritual system, based upon your spiritual perspective of things, and knowing that, okay, this is seeing it for what it is, not just physically, emotionally, and mentally, but the depth of it when it comes to spiritually, where that all comes from. And being able to say, okay, this is something that I can see. I am on the spiritual path. I am on the spiritual path of existence. And that's going to be your perspective. And if you're doing things that are, let's say, not in favor of your spiritual path, not in favor of putting you on a greater, expanded spiritual plane of existence, then you could possibly be holding yourself back. One may see this as someone who is not able to grow, not able to expand when it comes to spiritually, And that could be your spiritual ideals, your virtues, your principles, anything that you carry that is far beyond just what we can see physically, what we can think when it comes to mentally, which that has a lot to do with the mental realm, or what we can feel emotionally, and having that spiritual perspective to perceive all things in existence. So stay spiritually protected when it comes to that. And when it comes to being aware of what we're doing and how that's putting us along our spiritual path in life, and that's something that you need to take into consideration and to spiritually have that perspective to see. That's going to be it for this video. I'm out.